the Invest Southwest Round 3 RFP process has been going very well. That process is going to end here in the next few weeks, and I believe those RFPs will be made public by the city. Thank you again to CCAC members for all of your efforts. This is a great example of the private sector stepping up and helping the city develop real concrete plans using our experiences from the central city and translating that into successes in the neighborhoods. So thank you again for all who have participated in that. We haven't really started talking about round 4 yet, but I know that conversation is coming. So if you haven't had a chance to get involved in the Invest Southwest RFP writing process, please let me know and I'll make sure you get put on the list for round 4. I also want to update the membership on our Forward Together implementation plan. For those of you who weren't aware, the city was so impressed with CCAC's efforts last year with our corridor revitalization effort, as well as the Invest Southwest program, that when the city decided that it wanted to do a recovery plan for the central city, they asked CCAC members to once again provide concrete assistance. And so we've been working hand in glove with the city these past few months on Forward Together implementation, something many of you are involved in, and many CCAC staff have been doing a lot of work, and the city recognizes that effort and greatly appreciates that work. Greg Hummel and a few of our other members, Andrew Broderick and Chris Hall, presented before the Chicago Plan Commission a few weeks ago, and that was a really great presentation that talked about the great effort that we're doing. That program will be concluding here in the next few weeks. I don't want to get ahead of myself and reveal anything, but we have some really big, really exciting announcements that will be forthcoming. Speaking of things that are forthcoming, I want to let you know who our speaker is for next month. We have Michael Fashnot, who is the interim executive director, or I'm sorry, CEO of World Business Chicago. He's also the city's chief marketing officer. And he's going to be unveiling and talking about what World Business Chicago is doing in a post-COVID world. And so that's going to be real exciting. So please make sure you circle your calendars for next month's May meeting. Last bit of housekeeping news. This is something we do every year. We're a little late in doing it this year, obviously, which is collecting the contact information for all CCAC members. So Nira, who has been helping us, she's going to be sending each CCAC member an email here in the next week or so to a Google document for you to list all the members of your firm or organization that should be receiving CCAC correspondence, as well as solicit ideas for members of your firm that should be invited to join the Burnham Council, which is our young leadership organization to foster and mentor the next generation of Chicago's civic leaders. So I think that's all my housekeeping items, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McKinney, who will introduce our guest speaker and get the conversation going.
Thank you, Clint, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the April meeting for the Chicago Central Area Committee. It is my extreme pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker this afternoon, my friend and colleague, Brad Henderson. So let me just give a brief bio for Brad. Brad is currently the CEO of P33. Previously, he was a senior partner at the Boston Consulting Group, where he led their operations practice and was a BHI fellow researching impact investing and ESG. Brad serves on several nonprofit boards, including Axiom, Interface Youth Corps, the Chicago History Museum, the University of Chicago College Advisory Council, and the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. He is a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and a Leadership Greater Chicago Fellow. Brad graduated from the University of Chicago, Phi Beta Kappa, where he received both his bachelor's and master's, and he also attended Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar. And as I said in the beginning, Brad is not only a colleague, but he's also a great friend, and I'm really excited to welcome him to our April CCAC meeting today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brad.
Real honor, Suzette. And just one clarification, Clinton, Suzette, how long, just give me a couple introductory remarks. What's a good length of time for that?
I'd say probably, just go with it, Brad, whatever, whatever feels good.
I will go with that. And so I'd say I was really enjoying the breakout conversations. I can tell this is a group that is just deeply invested in our city and how to think about what's going to be a really crucial few months. So I'll try to keep my remarks relatively brief because I'm excited to hear some of the questions and dialogue, and I can learn from you all as part of this. And I really appreciate the introduction, Dr. McKinney. I've just so enjoyed working with you and all the work that you're doing, trying to solve some of the trickier innovation challenges that could be big unlocks for Chicago. And so the partnership means a lot to me. So just very briefly, P33 is, I'll just give, and some of you I'm sure know this, but I'll give a little bit of the background, a little bit of where we are today, and spend the most time on just the problems we're trying to solve on behalf of our region. So we were founded actually when Secretary Penny Pritzker came back from DC, and I think she had a reaction not uncommon to lots of people who love Chicago, which is basically, wow, I love this city and I can't believe how many great things there are, but why do I have this sense that we're falling behind a little bit? And so in her case, it was just traveling around the world and in her Commerce Secretary role. I joined the conversation with her and about 10 others soon thereafter, and I was having a very similar experience. So I was leading BCG's operations practice, which is a global business. I love Chicago. I'm deeply invested in it. But most of the innovative work we were doing was with MIT or Carnegie Mellon or the Singaporean government, and it sort of belies an easy answer as to why more of that work and more of BCG's work or Secretary Pritzker's work that's truly pushing the frontier isn't happening in Chicagoland. So what she did is she assembled, with help from BCG, McKinsey, and Accenture, about 400 business leaders from all walks of life, anchored by Chris Gladwin, who's a serial tech entrepreneur, and Kelly Welsh, who's the head of the Civic Committee, an effort to just understand the problem. So they did hearing about your Invest Southwest work, I think collectively those consulting firms did about $10 million in pro bono work on behalf of the group and 700 megabytes of research. So if you're really interested in the executive health check for all things innovation in Chicago, that's what I had on my first day of the job. But that period of, I'd call all volunteer army, 400 people, ultimately landed in there are 3 or 4 big challenges that we have that we could unlock for Chicago. That work completed in July of 2019. That's when I stepped into the role I have now. So I basically left BCG after 20 years and started to build this as a full-time job. We're a formal 501c3, and I have about 15 staff. We raised 5 years of funding to basically ensure we could make a run at the problems that we identified in the work. And so in general, the way we work is we say, where's a big unlock for the economy? How do we sit with very closely the folks, the institutional partners and individuals in our region who have some ability to influence the way that thing works? We typically redesign a way to reboot how that works in our economy, and then we raise funds and launch a new solution. And so as you can imagine, for every single problem we encounter, the actual substance of work we're on is very different, but the process is the same. So what are the couple problems we're working on? The first one, which I think has a lot of importance for what you all do, is the role of science in our economy in our region. And so there's this really basic insight that Chicago has the 3rd best science in the country, and we're not in the top 10 in turning science into jobs. And so how do you turn that around? It actually turns out that I heard the word, I think, collision a few times in my breakout conversations. Intentional collisions to bring science out of a lab into a company is something that MIT is incredibly good at, that in the Bay Area, they're incredibly good at it, and we're not very good at it here. And there are lots of things that get in the way of that. What's fascinating is our science is as good. So I have this great chart that basically says in life sciences, where Chicago has been losing life sciences jobs the past 10 years. It's remarkable. No one is losing life sciences jobs, and we are. Chicago has the same amount of science R&D, or life sciences R&D in our universities as Boston. So the actual federal government is giving scientists, really good scientists of equal quality, the same amount of money, and they have 100 times the venture capital that we do in Boston. And so think about in areas like quantum computing, which I'm happy to talk about more later, life sciences, energy storage, et cetera. These are areas where hundreds of billions of dollars of capital are going to get deployed to build companies. And I have a team of folks I call my deep tech team. They're all PhD business people, so science entrepreneurs. They're working with our regional universities, venture investors, and there's a big planning component to the way that these interactions occur. That for us is a big unlock for Chicago. I'd say last year was a pretty good year for us on the sciences front. So life sciences, you probably know on the West Loop, we have new physical plant going up that is attracting new folks. Talking a lot with Suzette on the potential to do that, not only in Sterling Bay's existing facility, but in addition, some property that they're developing in Lincoln Yards. But I think in general, our sense is between our hospitals and our universities and life sciences, we've started to turn the corner. On quantum computing, I just want to make one quick aside. You'd say, well, what the hell does it have to do with sort of planning the future physical plant of the city? It turns out it's a huge deal. So right now, I think that the quantum computing industry is about $80 million. So that's not exactly, I mean, I think probably the business for plastic bottle tops is bigger than quantum computing right now. But by 2033, the year that I have to meet my goals, it'll be $1.5 trillion. And what's incredible is over the past 12 months, Chicago won 3 of the 8 big federal grants in quantum computing, well over $500 billion in money, and have assembled some of the best faculty in the world. And if you didn't see it last week, with all of the big research institutions in Chicago, and this is something my team worked on, we announced the first quantum computing startup accelerator in the country last week. And so if you think about all that vitality around new companies doing quantum computing, that's going to happen here in Chicago. That really matters a lot for future building as well and planning. The University of Chicago right now is exploring a multi-billion-dollar facility in quantum computing. They are going to get $200 million from the state of Illinois, who doesn't have a lot of money to build it. And we think that's just the first of many facilities needed to support these companies. Quick dumb thing, what is quantum computing? Think of it as instead of silicon saying 1 or 0 to tell you, how to code something onto a computer, this is basically using the minuscule spin of an electron in an atom to code the same information. So something that could take our best supercomputer in America right now 50 years to solve a problem, a quantum computer can do in minutes. And what makes it particularly powerful is it's unhackable. So the second you try to identify that that electron and how it's spinning, you make it unreadable. You cannot hack a quantum computer. So you can imagine the kinds of things it can do for fighting cancer or protecting your bank account or whatever it might be. So plank 1, all around bringing science into jobs in Chicago. Plank 2 for us is all around who is and is not getting investment capital. And so you probably know this, but Chicago is awash in financial capital. We have wealthy families, foundations, private equity firms, venture firms, asset managers, you name it. We actually have a lot of resources in this city, top 3 or 4 in the country. And yet people of color get 1.1% of that capital. And so I have an initiative called Tech Rise that we launched. And it's essentially at the very beginning of the entrepreneurial life cycle, which is friends and family round. If any of you have ever started a business, it really pays if you're starting a company to have friends and family who are quite wealthy and have lots of connections and a really strong network. And needless to say, the socioeconomic data says people of color and women don't have those same networks. So the typical Black founded business in Chicago, when it starts, has $5,000 in funding. The typical white founded business has $125,000. And so if you think about trying to build a business, if you just start $5,000 versus $125,000, and then say, well, why is it that the Black business wasn't as successful? That's step one. I can describe to you through the entire chain how the gap actually gets bigger the further you go along. But the program we've launched is we've raised a $5 million investment fund that goes. It's essentially Chicago paying for the Friends and Family Round for Black and Brown entrepreneurs. So every week, 40 weeks a year, 5 people of color walk onto a virtual stage now with seasoned investors. The winner walks home with a $50,000 check. That $50,000 check is a grant. And then those investors agree to help them find even more support and follow-on investment. And we think it'll dramatically increase the number of people of color who get to take a run at building their own company. So that's plank 2, who gets capital. And the last plank, which was equally essential for the work that you all do, is all around talent, and specifically tech talent. And so just some basic data that I'm sure you all know, but the median tech or digital job pays $88,000 a year, whereas the median non-tech job pays $28,000 a year. The median, the stock of non-tech jobs is shrinking. So if you're in a non-tech profession, it's essentially it doesn't mean it's going to go to zero, but it's not growing. And tech jobs, as defined very broadly, are growing at 7% a year. So the question becomes how, if that's the basis for competition for a city to succeed, A, how do we make sure we have an incredibly well-prepared workforce? And B, and this is where the data is even more sobering, how do you take a phenomenon where in our city, 10% of the tech workforce is people of color, and yet our population is 66% people of color. And so to address this, my team has created something with our board called the Talent Coalition. The Talent Coalition is 25 of the biggest companies in Chicagoland, and then 25 of our fastest growing companies. So these would be, if you guys know, Oak Street Health is now it's a startup that has a $15 billion valuation in the West Loop that essentially does, it serves Medicare patients in a very unique way where they make money if they keep their patients healthy. So startups and big companies coming together to say, what are the common solutions to A, bringing more talent back to Chicago, and B, ensuring the talent that we make is appropriately diverse and that people of color get a shot. There are 2 programs in there, and then I'll wrap up. The first program in the talent side is something that I think is incredibly exciting for what we're collectively trying to do here. It's a program called Destination 312. And so Destination 312 is basically an effort to get people who've left Chicago back to Chicago companies. Really interesting data, 57,000 experienced engineers, so developers, these engineers, I mean computer science engineers, have left Chicago. These are considered the most in-demand professionals in the country right now. The research we've done, and we've identified these folks using really interesting data scraping technology that comes from a Chicago startup. The research we've done with these individuals says they're actually more open to moving back to Chicago than we might otherwise think. I'll give you a very common story in this work. So most often the typical person grew up in Naperville, they went to Urbana, they got a CS degree. Everyone in Urbana said, don't go work in Chicago, there are no jobs there, get a job at Google. They moved to Mountain View. They worked there for 4 or 5 years. They took a job at a startup. They're now 30, and they're saying to themselves, well, it's time to buy a house. I just got married. And that woman speaks to her husband and they start doing their house hunting search, and it's $7.4 million for a 3-bedroom house in Mountain View. And mom's getting older in Naperville and they remember that they want to raise a family. And the big thing that gets in their way is they actually think Chicago doesn't have tech jobs. And so this platform we built, it's a combination of data scraping technology, a digital marketing campaign, working with a number of marketing partners in Chicago like Rise Interactive and Energy BBDO. There's actually a fulfillment platform where we've signed up 50 companies that are essentially doing peer-to-peer marketing. And then we're enlisting the help of the mayor, alumni association, et cetera. It's this big campaign to basically say to those 57,000 individuals, actually, we do have opportunities here for you. And let's introduce you directly to those employers so you can network and find yourself a job. And we're not going to just introduce you to one company because everybody's worried if it doesn't work out with that one company, I'm in limbo and I can't find another job. We give them a plan B and a plan C. And so we've been piloting that work during the course of this year. We actually launch it in May, hopefully timed perfectly with the reopening of Chicago and the return of the sun and fun and Sox game and Cubs games. But it's something we're cautiously optimistic about. The last thing I'll mention about this Destination 3-1 program is you don't actually have to move back to Chicago. And so obviously we want everyone to move back. But in a work from home environment, if even you've met a guy called Mike Gamson, he's one of the unsung, or maybe sung, he's a true hero of the Chicago tech community. He was a LinkedIn executive, now runs a firm called Relativity. And Mike introduced this phrase that we love called the two-putt. And so we're comfortable with the two-putt to get people back to Chicago, which is essentially look at all the great companies based in Chicago that are hiring, and they're more than happy for you to start by staying in San Francisco to work there. But you're going to love it. And you're going to hear more from your teammates that the culture in Chicago is really great. And so over time, we're going to work on getting you back. And so just in summary, my organization exists to better position Chicago working with community for the challenges of the new economy. We do work in science, job creation, in translation. We do work in getting capital people of color, and we do the work and to bolstering our tech workforce to prepare for the future. It's different in some respects than what you all do often for a living, but I think it's highly complementary. Just having been a part of really well-planned built environments, really well-planned urban planning and community, like physical plant has to connect ultimately to innovation strategy. And I think we've got a lot of potential here in our region if we get it right. I'll make one last comment, which is the why now beyond the hope of vaccines. The only other thing that I'd say that my job has changed so much in the past 3 months for the good. And I make no political statement. So anyone on the call can have voted for whomever you like, and I'm sure you're a very good person. But the Biden administration, in terms of an opportunity for Illinois, has been incredible. Specifically, his commitment to two things, sustainability and union jobs. And so what it's meant for us is companies like GM went from saying, we're going to try to undermine air pollution standards to we're going to invest $30 billion to build all electric all the time, forever, for the future. And you want to talk about making our job easier, that's incredibly helpful. So the flood of jump balls in CapEx right now around sustainable food, sustainable agriculture, sustainable manufacturing, et cetera. And what's fascinating about all that is Chicago is incredibly well positioned. You all probably know way more about the industrial real estate land market than I do, but we can't find land right now for the amount of inbound partners we have who want to be somewhere in the Midwest in a pro-union state to build out all this physical plant. We may miss our moment, we may not capture it, but I will also say the governor of Texas and the governor of Georgia in the Michigan legislature seem to be volunteering every day to make our jobs even easier by making their states less attractive. So we have this very rare moment in a state that's broke and cold and has lots of challenges to actually seize a moment. I think right now, my job, I've had more opportunities in the past 2 months than I did in the first 2 years of work because of a massive change in November. I will end with that, and I would welcome questions and comments.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. Such an enlightening presentation on not just P33 and its work, but also what needs to happen to, cultivate greater tech talent and attract greater tech talent back to the Chicago area. So before we jump into questions, I just would like to remind everyone to please place your questions in the chat. Feel free to send those to me. You can either just put it in there for everyone to see or send it to me privately and I will relay it to Brad. So I've already had one question come through, but I'm going to take the facilitator's prerogative and start with my own question first.
Great.
So that is, Brad, from your perspective, what do you think are the 3 to 4 biggest challenges facing Chicago today with regards to the innovation economy?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one by far is the one that my organization isn't responsible for, and that's our fiscal situation, right? I mean, I think it is not having any way to answer the question, "What the hell are you doing?" Is paralyzes people who are making big decisions, right? And so that's I say it's an issue that I have enough of understanding because of my old job at BCG to say, like, if we just had a decent answer, we'd be better off. But we don't, right? We just are ignoring it. And our tax base is actually, like, if you look at it, I mean, if anyone's looked at the progressive income tax rates in states like Minnesota, which have an incredibly good reputation as being investor friendly, or Wisconsin, et cetera, it's not like we don't have a story to tell, but we're not telling the story, which just means perceptions writes the story. And so again, I'm making no political claim. I can just tell you everyone I talk to, and probably everyone you all talk to, brings that up as the first challenge that they put on the table. The second one also is not specifically tied to what we do as an organization, but it's fair to say that the challenges with crime and underinvestment in neighborhoods and just the longstanding inequities that exist in Chicago, it's very clear if we don't rally around solving those, again, it's just a massive drag on not only the potential of the folks who live in those neighborhoods, but the long-term potential for Chicago and our state and our region. And so I'll be honest, there's not a meeting about the future of Illinois where people thinking about Illinois don't bring up those two things.
Sure.
But then there's work that isn't tied to those two things, which are things I actually work on, which are things that you actually work on, Dr. McKinney. And I think the biggest one related to that is we have taken, for my humble opinion, we've taken for granted the fact that we are way over indexed to world-class research universities in this city and been very passive about it. And I think our current mayor and our past mayor have invested mightily in economic development, but I would encourage you all to go and look at their plans and see how intentional we've been in bringing those universities into the center of innovation strategy. And I think we've got a B- or C+ at best. And we just take it for granted. Like, there are a bunch of smart people in Evanston and in Bronzeville and in Hyde Park and in Urbana, and good stuff will happen. If you compare that to Philadelphia, which has actually put UPenn at the center of what they're doing very intentionally, a lot less taken for granted and let it happen as it might. They've kicked our butts. And so that, Suzette, is what you and I think about every day. And it's core to our opportunity, but we haven't lived into it yet. We need to bring those universities and the scientists in those universities a lot more into the center of what we do from an innovation perspective.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Well, Brad, let me just tell you, you have really sparked something in our CCAC members because these questions are rolling in.
That's great.
And I've never seen questions like this from our CCAC audience in the past. So let me just jump right in. The first one is with regards to the engineers, some of that talent that you talked about who have left the area and now, we're interested in trying to bring them back. So the question is, and I think you've already touched on this a bit, but maybe I'll just ask you to elaborate. The question is, why did they leave? And what is the biggest selling point for getting them to move back?
Very consistently, they left because they were told the labor market was too thin or too shallow in interesting tech in Chicago. So it's basically, yeah, that's great. You can go work for company A, but if it doesn't work out there, there are like 2 more opportunities in Chicago. That is the story again and again. And so if you want depth, if you want labor market liquidity on really interesting tech problems, you got to leave Chicago. That's what everyone has been told at Urbana and U Chicago and Northwestern, who's in tech. Not if you're in business or finance or marketing, that's not the case. But in tech, that's what you've been told for a decade now.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it becomes the biggest opportunity to flip it on its head. So what has changed now, and the data to arm you all with, is we have over 150 growth stage tech startups now. Growth stage means Series B or later. That basically means if you're that kind of firm, it means you've proven your product works. You've hired the core team and you've sold it to a bunch of people. Now what's left is hire the next 500 employees and sell it to everybody. And what's great about those are the jobs that most people in tech want. Most people don't want to be part of the 3 people in a garage part of things, because it turns out like it's hard to pay. You know, that's a lot of ramen noodles, and it's actually nice to have a full paycheck. So these growth stage startups, of which we had 10 years ago, having 150 means I've got a plan A through plan 150. And so that's the selling point.
Yeah.
Is we now have lots of companies like the ones you're looking for, more than you could ever need in your life.
Well, that's really interesting, because this next question is related, but it's talking about, soon to be graduates. So the question that came in from one of our members says, I know a number of kids graduating from the University of Chicago in computer science who can't find jobs. When is the Destination 312 platform going live, and are there other resources that they should know about?
You can't find jobs in Chicago or generally? Let's see. So
I'm going to assume
Chicago.
Yes.
If anyone wants to put my email in, I can put my email in the chat. So the program, I mean, we're operating it already. And I actually work with U Chicago Career Services. My team does as well. And so we should be able to help. I mean, we've worked with all of the chief technologies officers and CHROs of these companies, and they're looking for people. And I'm involved with the university enough to know they've really gotten good at sending kids to JP Morgan Chase and BCG and places like that. I don't think the university's figured out yet quite how to do the tech stuff. Computer science, when I was there, was 10 kids. I think it's become a very strong program now. And so my guess is they just haven't quite gotten connected to employers. I would love to help. And my guess is my team is as well placed as anyone to help those students. So please send them my way. And then what I'll do is also make sure we connect with the folks on campus recruiting to do a better job of making sure they're connected to some of these employers.
Yeah. And I would just echo your sentiment, Brad, about your team. I'm very involved with P33. So I was on a call with Michelle this morning. So
that's great.
For our membership, I will say, when Brad offers up his assistance or that of his team, please take advantage of it, because they are really serious about their work. They are champions for Chicago, and they just work tirelessly to help attract and bring back talent, as well as companies and employers to Chicago and to the region. Which that actually is a good segue into our next question. And it comes from our member, Stephen Friedman, who asks, what are the key barriers to landing the companies that are looking to expand here in our region?
So I have a strong point of view on this, which is the Chicago and the regional real estate attraction story. If we get into traditional RFP-based site selection, we're in trouble, right? Yeah. Because by the time it's gotten to that, it's pretty commoditized. The choices are narrowed, and you're competing on a lot of stats where we lose. And so what we're seeing, and we've got, stay tuned in the paper, I think there are 3 or 4, we think Wall Street Journal worthy announcements coming over the next 2 months or so. Where we win is when we actually have more of a business development function, a proactive outreach function, where we have our list of companies we want to go talk to, because we think there's something far beyond the tax credits and the property tax. When I joined BCG, we had 40 people in our office in Chicago, and by the time we left, we had 600 people, and we didn't look at tax credits. We didn't look at property taxes. We didn't. It would have been a lot cheaper to move to Indiana, but we weren't moving to Indiana, and it's because we found business reasons to be here. It's why I think our universities become huge assets in this, right? It's if you're a life sciences company, is a lower property tax rate going to be the thing that is the difference between $1 billion valuation and a $2 billion valuation? No. but knowing that you can collaborate right down the street from the Sterling Bay facility with that researcher in the Query Simpson Institute on the campus of Northwestern, and facilitating the introduction and getting to know their postdocs, et cetera, that's where I think we can win. And so to me, in areas like food, ag, life sciences, any business that requires being around really smart experts, that's where I just think we need to do a better job and work closely with Intersect Illinois, WBC, all of our business development organizations. We have to do way more of that, because our natural strengths are ones that don't fit into the RFP site selection process.
Agreed, agreed. And that's why I talk so much about knowledge communities and the need to cluster companies and academic institutions and others together, because it's the the diversity of that work, and it's the ability of being in close proximity where you really get to talk to others and innovate. So, all right, so let's see, next question. The capital markets and real estate have a big red X over our region due to high real estate taxes and fiscal challenges with the city, the county, and the state. So how do we get our leaders to focus on these issues, find solution to the pension issues that are not tied solely to raising taxes on companies and residents of the state? Wow, that's a heavy question, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, holding out hope for the Illinois political system is a tough bet to take. It's,
right.
So I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think my general experience, and I engage a lot with political leadership, is they're all good people, right? I mean, no one takes a 90% pay cut from a corporate job to go into elected office, to where there's paint peeling off your office walls and the computers don't work as well, et cetera. I mean, it's not, you don't go into that because you don't care. But my experience also is on this particular topic. I haven't met anyone who strikes me as the kind of person who's going to take up and try to solve this problem. So I haven't met anyone. And so where my head naturally goes is to two things. I wish I could say I found the person who's going to go fight the fight, and I consistently find that all of their incentives are not to do anything at all. And so the two things that strikes me is, the first is, to the extent that any of you are invested in this issue, there's a version of this story which is sort of people on the North Shore complaining about property taxes to themselves, as if like doing more of that is going to change the political calculus. And I think that's a huge risk, right? The question becomes, what is the opposing constituent to invest in that could actually change the political calculus? And so here's my idea, and I think the data that I saw at BCG bears this out. One of the groups most harmed by our fiscal situation is actually community service organizations. Anybody in the mental health business, anybody trying to help homelessness or the working poor. The data really says that the disinvestment we have in our state in community services over the past 20 years, that's really what's been hurt by our pension crisis. And so anyone who can invest more in mobilizing those communities to actually say directly to their elected official, do you realize your inability to respond to this is hurting our mental health clinic, our housing efforts, et cetera? That's not happening yet. And until we invest in that, I think related to that is the same with labor. So anybody who's in the trades, anybody who's working, the amount of lost opportunities for labor. So, I'm a business person who doesn't like taxes as much, although I'm pretty progressive by nature. No one cares what I think on this. We actually care in this. In Illinois, you got to invest in, I think, community service organizations and labor. That's who could change the calculus here. And we're too busy talking to one another. The only other thing I'll mention is my job at P33 is to invest in offense. So I have to grow the economy. And so what I hope to help, Bob asked the question. What I hope is that there are enough companies in food and ag and energy, et cetera, who honestly don't care about property taxes because they're working in, I'm working right now with a rare earth mining company. Their operating margins are 90%. They don't care about taxes. So I need to find enough of them to give us a fighting chance on the political side. And lots of companies still are willing to overlook really bad property tax issues because they want to be as close to Northwestern and University of Chicago as possible.
Yeah. So our member Rana Lee from the Smith Group has a couple of questions in the chat, but I want to go, I'm saving her first question for last because I think it's a great closing question. So her other question is, what are the most effective strategies to increase opportunity and pipelines for people of color to actively participate in the new economy?
Yeah, such a good question. And the biggest one is non-coursework exposure to companies is what our data shows is by far the biggest gap creator between people of color and women and white men. And so, think of it as, two kids go to UIC. One is from a white family in the suburbs, and the other one is from Lawndale. They get to take the same classes, they get the same grades. At the end of that process, the likelihood that the white kid gets a job in tech is so much higher. And it's because of very subtle things. His cousin helped him with his resume because he knew how to build a resume. His uncle helped him mentor and just sort of explain how the tech industry works. His dad or mom made an introduction, so he got a sophomore year internship. Even though it wasn't the best internship, it just showed he wasn't working in retail, which I applaud, by the way, having had to pay my own way through much of life, working jobs that just got you enough money to pay for car insurance. And then the full-time internship before your senior year. Those things, which I think all of your firms are capable of, my guess is each of you are thinking about, how do we do more advanced analytics work? How can we add a component to software to the way that we serve our clients, et cetera? BCG was a business that was in the business of writing PowerPoint slides, but we probably now have, out of 20,000 people, 2,000 people who are doing technology type work because the business changes. And so my charge to all of you is, how do you find roles and exposure for these kids early in their careers so they can make up some of those social capital gaps that happen outside of the classroom in our good universities? It's a big issue.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Wow. Well, Brad, I have to tell you, and I know we are quickly approaching our time, but as you're talking, I'm sitting here and the wheels in my brain are turning. Because we had, MHub Haven presented to us in March, and you're here in April, and Michael is coming in May. So I don't know, I'm sensing some sort of special program featuring all three of you on a panel. And, we might have to find space for Betsy or Steven in there somewhere as well.
Got it. Love those guys and gals.
Yeah, so Clint, keep a note, because when Greg comes back, I'm going to have a new idea for us. But I want to go to what I think is the perfect final question, Brad. And again, I have just so appreciated you speaking with us today. But this is Rana's question as well. And she says that there are many, many disciplines represented on our call today. So how can we, as individual business owners or business people, as well as a collective group, help realize P33's vision?
Wow, that's good. That you want to talk about a stop and make you think question.
I told you this was a very engaged group, and they also care deeply about Chicago.
Yeah. So I two things. I mean, the first one I already said, which is just, I think that those little roles you create for young people who, so, and I will say, like, one of the things was always at my former employer, BCG, I fought so hard for diversity in our culture, and we made a lot of progress on the gender diversity side, but very limited on the racial diversity side. And I'm happy to get more into that if someone wants to, over a cup of coffee, talk more about it. But it was all those decisions we made about the little internship things that you could see 5 years later made a huge difference. And so, the dad who was at Goldman Sachs, who could get his kid to the front of the line in the internship process, was very rarely a person of color, right? And what we didn't do is the opposite of that, which is to find the people who deserve the shot who weren't going to get it if we didn't try. So I already mentioned that. I think that's one of the biggest things we all can do. is to not just rely on that referral from our client who says, help my kid get a job. We should do some of that too. I mean, that's how social networks work. The one that I think is particularly relevant for what I understand all of you to do is the whole notion of breaking down silos. And so the idea that just the architectural community or just the planning community or just the scientists or just the venture capitalists or just the corporate leaders or just the consultants or just the public sector can solve these problems. The places I go where I get the most excited in my trips around the country and the world, my old job, where you found communities where it was the brilliant architect who found the really cool venture partner in the ag space, who actually found a young person, scientist from Urbana who had the cool idea. That notion of cross-stakeholder engagement and some of the serendipity that comes from interacting more with people not like you, who don't think like you, et cetera. That's what I would encourage. And so I presume that's part of why I'm here, is to give a take that is more, maybe different than some of the more traditional work that you may all do. I sure as heck know that planning and place and architecture have had a lot more to do with great experimentation and innovation than I'm qualified or knowledgeable enough to be able to explain why and how. And so that's my big ask, is reach wider, dig deeper to find people who are different than you as you solve these problems. And as CCA and your firms think about partnering, how do you reach one step further to pull in the seemingly random guest to that working session who may just get you to think about things differently? That's where Chicago, the thing that's awesome about the data is it says we have all the pieces we need to be a great innovation city, but we're actually one of the least effective at really collaborating across some of those boundaries.
Agreed. Wow. Fantastic, Brad. And, many of us have, been the professional that helped either our own kid find an internship or our neighbor's kid find an internship. And, I'm under no illusion that those types of things will stop. But I would challenge all of us that when we are trying to help, kids that we know that are in our network find internships, that at the same time, we also try and identify an equal opportunity for an internship for a young person of color. And there are so many organizations across this city and across the region that work with children from underrepresented communities that could benefit from those internships. It is certainly something that I have committed to in my work here at Sterling Base. So I would just challenge us all to do the same. Brad, there is just not enough time in the day ever to have a full conversation with you. But again, I'm just so thrilled that you were able to be with us today and that our CCAC membership and community had the opportunity to hear from you. So as you can see, tons of accolades coming into the chat for your talk today. I think I just saw a book recommendation pop up. So for our CCAC members, thank you all for your great engagement today. Brad, I'm gonna figure out a way. I wanna have you back, but
It'd be my pleasure.
We'll
I look forward to working with you all.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everyone, great conversation today and wonderful meeting. Thank you all so much. I'm always cognizant of everyone's time. So we are literally at 12:59, and I am going to bid you all a fond farewell and wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you all.